Story 1. Years ago, I was living in a relatively nice and quiet duplex, working as a contractor for a small company. It was the winter of 2016, and while the area I lived in was lonely, I always appreciated what I had in life. I won't name the town, but it resembled the Oala-type area. Those familiar with it will probably understand the rural grasslands, rolling hills, and scattered forms of civilization along the roads. Though I got lonely at times, it wasn't always like that. I lived with my miniature dachshund, Sadi, big bark, small bite. She was the most precious thing in the world, my comfort dog, always there for me when I was feeling down. One day, after returning from work, I started up the stove to heat up some food. Midway through cooking, I heard Sadi barking at my bedroom door. Oblivious, I assumed she was just bored, but she continued even after I told her to stop. Opening the bedroom door, she darted in, barking under my bed. My heart sank. She was chasing something. Assuming it was a lizard or a roach, I put Sadi in the kitchen to quiet her. My duplex was near a wooded area, so small unwanted creatures were not uncommon. After eating, I put my plate in the dishwasher, got ready for bed, and slept for about an hour before waking to Sadi barking again. Annoyed, I tried to grab her, but she jumped off the bed and barked under it. Feeling something was off, I looked under with a flashlight. There was a man's face, smiling at me with abnormally large eyes. He gestured to be quiet, and that's when I screamed. I yelled for him to leave, but there was no response. Panicking, I locked myself in the bathroom with Sadi. After a minute, I heard heavy footsteps approaching and a tap on the door. The man tried to pick the lock, saying he could break it down in 2 seconds. Realizing the danger, I decided to escape through a small frozen shut window, using the shower head to break it. Outside, I went to the neighbors and called the police. They arrived quickly, apprehended the man, and informed me that everything in my room was destroyed. He had also broken down the bathroom door, demonstrating unusual strength. The police criticized my approach, but I later understood their perspective. If I hadn't broken the window, things could have taken a darker turn. I haven't heard of the man since, and I've moved from that area. Sadly, Sadi passed away in late 2018 due to cancer. Although she's no longer with me, her soul remains, and I'm grateful for her alerting me to the danger. I love you, Sadi. Now, I live alone in a somewhat busy neighborhood. This incident happened about a year ago. Story 2. A while ago, it was winter, and I live in an area that usually gets a lot of snow. Not only was there already some snow on the ground, but it was also bitterly cold. One night, I was at home by myself when a heavy snowfall began. I had heard about an approaching snowstorm, so I had no plans of going anywhere. Fortunately, I was working from home for the next several days. As the snow continued to come down, I occasionally looked out of my window, witnessing the increasing snow accumulation. By nighttime, I was relieved that I didn't have to go anywhere. Occasionally, a snowplow would pass by, but otherwise, it was very quiet. Around 7 p.m., there was a knock at my front door, which struck me as odd. I approached the window and saw a young woman standing there. I couldn't spot a car, and since my view of the street and driveway isn't great from the front windows, I was unsure where she had come from. She wasn't dressed for the weather, wearing only pants and a sweatshirt. She seemed to be in her early 20s. Despite feeling uneasy, I opened the door and inquired about her presence in the snowstorm. She explained that her ex-boyfriend had kicked her out of his car, and she needed to warm up. I asked if someone could pick her up, and she mentioned that her mom was on the way. Although hesitant about letting a stranger into my house, I felt sympathy due to the snowstorm and allowed her inside. I instructed her to wait near the front door, which is between the living room and dining room. As she entered, she unexpectedly walked straight into the dining room, apologizing quietly. Confused, I watched as she went to the back of the house, disappearing from my sight. Curiosity led me to follow her. When I turned the corner, I saw her at the back door, opening it. Before I could grasp the situation, two men walked right in. "Shh!" Shocked, my instincts kicked in and I sprinted in the opposite direction towards my hallway, where my bedroom and bathroom were located. I heard multiple footsteps behind me, but they were still a distance away. In the bathroom, I locked the door, but seconds later, someone tried to open it. Several people were now outside my bathroom. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but feeling unsafe, I opened my bathroom window quickly, jumped out, and landed on a snow-covered bush. Running through the deep snow in my yard, I fell multiple times but quickly got back up. Eventually, I reached the street and kept running until I was far away from my house. Once at a safe distance, I called 911 and explained the situation. I waited for the police to arrive. Upon returning home, I found it in disarray, with items scattered on the floor and a few things stolen. It could have been worse. As they didn't enter every room, I feel fortunate to have escaped unharmed. Since then, I don't answer the door for anyone I don't know. I've also installed a Ring doorbell for added security, a measure I wish I had at the time of the incident. I hope to never experience anything like that again. Story 3. Years ago, when I was still in high school and juggling school and a part-time job at a nearby restaurant, a peculiar incident unfolded during a winter snowstorm. I had been hearing about the approaching snowstorm all week and it was expected to hit in the afternoon. Unfortunately, I had to work after school until 8 p.m. Thankfully, the snow held up until towards the end of my shift. As I drove home, the intensity of the snowfall increased. Safely reaching home, I did some homework and then retreated to my bedroom to play video games. It was a Friday night, and with no school the next day or work, I planned to stay up late. My parents went to bed around 10 or 11, but I had no intention of going to bed anytime soon. My bedroom on the front side of the house was across and down the hallway from my parents' room. On this particular night, I left the window cover half open to enjoy the serene view of the snowfall. While immersed in my gaming on this snowy night, something unusual caught my eye. I noticed a man walking down the sidewalk in front of our house, even though it was close to midnight during a blizzard. Unfamiliar with him and puzzled by his late-night stroll, I paused my game to observe. The man, far away at first, turned and walked into our front yard, cutting through the grass towards our front step. This strange turn of events made my heart race, and I carefully left my room to investigate. Peeking around the corner, I observed him standing silently at the front step, not making any attempt to knock or ring the doorbell. After a minute or two, the man started walking away, retracing his steps through the yard. To my surprise, he stopped at the living room window, standing silently. Concerned, I retreated to my room, hoping not to be noticed. I listened closely for any signs of his presence. After a few moments, I cautiously looked out of my window, but the man was gone. I checked each window, and everything seemed normal until I reached the kitchen window at the back of the house. There, I saw the man standing on the back patio just a few feet from the back door. Terrified, I rushed back to my room, contemplating whether to call the police, wake up my parents, or hide and hope he would leave. As my mind raced, I heard a knock at the front door. Peering down the hallway, I saw the man back on the front step. Deciding not to answer, I watched as he stood there for several more minutes before turning and walking away. He didn't knock again, and I stayed vigilant until after 2 a.m. He never returned that night, and the next morning everything seemed fine. When I shared the experience with my parents, they dismissed it as a drunk neighbor, but the memory of that night still sends shivers down my spine. It was the creepiest encounter I've ever had, and I remained on edge, grateful he never returned. Story 4. This story happened one night as I was driving back home from work. The snowfall was intense, and by the time I left work, my car was already covered with 3 or 4 inches of snow. Despite this, I got inside my car and started driving, quickly realizing that the road conditions were extremely unsafe. It was around 10 p.m. and the roads were nearly deserted. Normally, the drive home takes about 15 minutes, but this time it took almost 30, due to the hazardous conditions. Throughout the journey, I noticed only one car behind me. I couldn't recall exactly when it started following me, but it was there, and each time I turned, it followed suit. By the time I was almost home, I assumed it might be one of my neighbors, given the slippery roads. As I turned onto my street, the car continued to follow at a slow pace. I thought it was a neighbor, considering the number of houses on my street, many of which I didn't know. Upon reaching my driveway, I turned and pulled into it, and the car behind me continued down the street. My house has a detached garage, so I drove up, opened the garage, parked inside, and closed the door. After turning off my car, I retrieved my bags from the back seat and left the garage. When I opened the garage door, I was surprised to see a car parked in my driveway. It seemed to be the same one that had been following me. Confused and unsure of what was happening, I made my way between the garage and the house to reach the front door. Upon seeing the parked car, I hesitated for a moment, contemplating what to do. It was dark, and the headlights, combined with the snow, made it impossible to identify the driver. Instead of confronting them, I decided to ignore it, hoping they would drive away. I walked past the car, feeling a bit uneasy, but my main goal was to get inside, especially considering the snowfall. I turned and walked along the front of my house toward the door. About halfway there, I heard the car door open, indicating that someone had gotten out. Although I didn't turn around immediately when I finally did. I saw a man standing next to the car, wearing a disturbing clown mask. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. Hastily unlocking the door, I entered my house. The man didn't move. He just stood there. Feeling creeped out, I went to the other end of the house, hoping to ignore the situation. When I checked back a few minutes later, both the car and the man in the clown mask were gone. While relieved, the strange incident left me with lingering questions. Why would someone follow me in such terrible driving conditions, only to stand there wearing a creepy clown mask? It's a perplexing memory that continues to leave me wondering to this day. Story 5. This incident occurred when I was a teenager, around 14 years old, probably during my freshman year in high school. It was winter and the sun had set, leaving the evening dark. We were in the midst of a heavy snowstorm, and my mum asked me to shovel the driveway while she cooked. Shoveling was usually my responsibility, and despite the challenging weather, I didn't mind doing it. Our driveway was long and straight, and I wanted to clear it while it was still snowing, making the task easier the next morning. Our neighborhood was generally quiet, with only about 10 houses on a cul-de-sac, and I knew most of the neighbors and their cars. As I neared the end of the driveway, shoveling the last section, I heard a car approaching our street. It was a larger, older black SUV, resembling a Chevy Suburban. I hadn't seen it before and wondered whose it could be. The SUV drove past me, then went around the cul-de-sac and started coming back down the street. At first, I thought it might be someone who had taken a wrong turn, but the car slowed down in front of our driveway, giving me an uneasy feeling. It moved past, but then pulled over right in front of our house, about 50 feet away. I debated running back inside, but decided to continue shoveling. The SUV sat there with the engine running, and nobody got out. After a few minutes, the door finally opened. By then, I was almost done shoveling. A tall, thin man wearing a black jacket, jeans, a winter hat, and with somewhat long hair got out and walked toward me. Feeling nervous, I resisted the urge to leave. The man greeted me, and despite my discomfort, I responded. He offered to help shovel and asked if I needed assistance. Politely declining, I mentioned I was almost finished. Then he inquired if I lived there, and I confirmed that I did. He stood there for a few moments as I finished shoveling. What happened next unnerved me. The man suggested, "If you want, I can take you anywhere you want to go right now." Confused and alarmed, I declined, stating I needed to go inside. As I walked away, he watched me until I reached about halfway up the driveway. Relieved, when I made it back inside, I told my parents about the encounter. Looking out the window, the man and his SUV were gone. It was one of the stranger experiences I'd had, but I stayed up late that night. Around 10 p.m., I looked out my window and saw the same SUV returning. My eyes remained on it, hoping the man wouldn't get out. After about a minute, the truck drove away. I informed my parents and my dad went outside, but the man had already left. After that night, I never saw the truck or the man again. While the incident still gives me the creeps, I'm thankful he didn't try to make me go with him. Reflecting on it, I realize I probably should have gone inside as soon as I saw the car parking in front of our house.
Story 6, Yard. We moved to Connecticut the summer before I entered 6th grade in 2001. We moved into a beautiful new house in one of the most beautiful towns I'd ever seen. It was a bit more rural than we were used to in New Jersey, but it was an adjustment. My sister is 2 years younger than me, and she was going into 4th grade at the time. We came from a neighborhood where we were all super close. Everyone knew one another, block parties every summer, and kids running back and forth to one another's houses. We were sad to leave it. Within the first few weeks, we met some of our neighbors. Everyone was what we soon defined as very Connecticut. It was all a bit surface, and nobody had that New Jersey warmth that we had been used to. In particular, our neighbors directly across the street seemed a bit odd. The mom would come over to vent to my mom about her sons and husband. My mom was a sweetheart and was very welcoming and warm. The holidays came around, and the neighbor boy across the street was in my sister's 4th grade class. My sister came back slightly alarmed with what had happened in class that day. The students were asked to make a Thanksgiving turkey out of a trace drawing of their hands. On each finger, they were supposed to write things they were thankful for. The neighbor boy wrote things like being a loser, hating myself, etc. Very, very dark things for a 4th grader. Fast forward to Christmas, and my mom hears that they have nowhere to go for the holidays. So she politely invites the mother and 2 of her sons to our annual Christmas Eve party. The boys were so strange. They listened to Japanese techno with headphones on and didn't speak to anyone. They headed straight to our basement to play video games. It was weird. The younger one, though, was always much stranger than the older one. The neighbor mom would always open up to my mom and aunt about how he would hurt himself and how he needed to be put in special needs programs, but that he could never quite be diagnosed. They thought that he was on the spectrum at first, but that quickly proved to not be the case. We always assumed that she'd been confiding in them because my aunt was experienced with special needs kids and that she was looking for advice from her. The Christmas Eve stands out to me because they were at our home in a very intimate setting, but we saw them on a daily basis. My sister and I would come home from school telling my mom about how weird the younger neighbor boy was and that something was just really off about him. I will never forget her telling us just to be nice to him and that we don't know what he's capable of. That struck me as so odd at the time, but we listened. I don't know if his mother told my mom something that scared her and made her say that, or if she just had a gut instinct. Recently after that, I can't quite remember if this was in middle school or high school. I think I was in nth grade, and my sister and the young neighbor boy were in 7th. So we all rode the bus together. What my mom then said stuck out in my mind. So today I decided to be friendlier than usual. There was snow on the ground, and the younger neighbor boy was drawing something in the snow and muttering to himself. I decided to greet him. "Hey Adam, what's going on? Nice morning today, huh?" He made no eye contact. "I'll bomb you," he said, still making no eye contact. We let it slide. We came home and told my mom. She reiterated, "Just be nice." We have no idea what this kid's capable of. Keep in mind, we were kids. We didn't know what to take seriously and what not to. I wished we had done more. Keep in mind, he wasn't someone who was bullied or made fun of. He was always off, in the sense that he could not hold eye contact or hold a conversation, or even a hello. Kids didn't make fun of him. He was a loner, but it seemed to be by choice. I never knew why we were cautious or afraid around him, other than the fact that he showed zero warmth and zero humanity. We knew he had special needs, so we never really second-guessed anything and just tried to be as polite as possible. When the bus would drop us off at all of our respective houses, he would run all the way up his driveway on the hill with his hands by his sides. Then he would turn around and make this weird hiss noise at everyone, making claws with his hands. It was always so odd, but again, we were kids, and there's always a couple of kids in school who are a little strange. We took it as just that. They were invited to several Christmas Eve parties, so memories kind of blend here. One year, the neighbor mom started screaming at my innocent grandmother for being a Yankees fan, as she was a Red Sox fan. It was beyond strange because my grandma's the cutest little lady of all time and was in no way trying to argue over sports. It was though as the woman clearly had a weird switch go off. She was always nice to me, but I'll be honest, we always rolled our eyes every single time my mom invited them over. It was always such forced conversations with her, and as a teenager, I wanted nothing to do with being cornered into another chat. I think she must have just been lonely. The following and final year, they were invited to Christmas Eve, was when she got into it with my mom about having guns in the house. The boys only attended the first couple of Christmas Eves, so it was just the mom this time around. The topic of guns came up. The neighbor mom started telling my mom about how she has guns in the house and how she takes her younger son to the shooting range all the time. My mom said that she didn't agree with having guns in the house. She wasn't trying to argue, but the neighbor mom got out of hand about it. Very defensive, and ultimately getting aggressive about how she grew up in New Hampshire. And that's just the way of life out there. The neighbor mom told us about how brilliant her younger son was, and that he hacked into some of the government's highest levels of security, and that the CIA showed up on his doorstep. We have absolutely no idea if this story is true or not, but this is what she told us. So it became our ongoing joke when anything strange happened at our house. There were a few odd things that happened throughout the years. Our internet had clearly been messed with, lights would flicker in the house, and we would joke that it was the younger boy each time. It wasn't until December 14th, 2012, that we knew just what he was capable of.
I was out of college, working outside of Philadelphia. My sister still a student in college, and my youngest brother a student at the high school. It was the worst day of all of our lives. My dad heard the gunshots in the morning that killed the neighbor mom, Nancy Lanza. He assumed it had been a hunter in the area, maybe a little closer than usual. That is, until the FBI showed up and had to evacuate the house as snipers had lined our driveway. My mom was at the mall, and we were all frantically calling one another as the news slowly broke throughout the day. At first, they had his identity all wrong and said it was his brother, but we knew it had to have been him. Thank God for my mom making sure we were as nice as possible, although I don't know that it would have stopped him. I wish we had done more at the time. I wish we knew to do more at the time. We didn't want to assume the worst out of someone, but I wish we had. Approximately 20 students and 6 teachers were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School that day. The worst act of evil I have ever experienced so directly in my life, and I hope I will never experience again. I'm very thankful that we survived growing up across the street from him, but I'm so gutted for those who didn't get so lucky. I hate it so much. I know I will never see him again, but regardless, Adam Lanza, you sick and twisted individual, I pray and hope to God that we